Okay, story time. So, returning to Buck Creek Pass for the second time. What's the deal with that? So, I've kind of started a little bit of a collection of these kind of nice panoramic photos of the Washington volcanoes. So, we have 5 in this state. And I've got plenty of nice photos of Mount Rainier that I'm happy with. Those are relatively easy to get, frankly. And I have a lot of photos of Mount Baker that I'm really happy with as well, just because I'm always in that area, and both from, snowboarding and also from backpacking trips that we've done around Mount Baker. So that leaves Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, and Glacier Peak. And I've got a photo of Mount St. Helens from Paradise at Mount Rainier, which I like quite a lot. I took it on a day we went snowshoeing and ended up making it a black and white monochrome photo. And I've printed this one really big, and my mom has like a 6-foot wide print of it hanging in her office that I thought came out really cool. It's not, I still would like to get more photos of Mount St. Helens, but at the moment, the highway that goes up to Johnston Observatory out there was washed out, and they haven't finished fixing it yet. So I kind of want to hold off on going to Mount St. Helens until the whole place is accessible. I'm sure there's plenty of other places you can get nice photos of Mount St. Helens, but I would like to be able to go up to Johnston Ridge and get photos from there as well. So I'll save that for another time. And I have pictures of Mount Adams. Granted, I don't have the kind of pano shots that I'm thinking of for this type of project, but I have some decent photos of it, and it's certainly on my list. I'll be working on that one. So that leaves Glacier Peak. And Glacier Peak is harder to get photos of. There's not really a place that you can just like drive in and just see it and get out of your car and take pictures. And even like shorter hikes don't really lead you to places where you've got a really nice view of it. Now, I have photos that have Glacier Peak in them, but they're taken from 100, 200 miles away, and we're looking at like a whole mountain range, and you can kind of pick out Glacier Peak. What I want is kind of, up close and personal, just the mountain in frame, nice wide photo. In order to get something like that, you've got to hike a pretty, significant hike to get in there. Buck Creek Pass is one of the places, once you get up the pass and over the saddle, where you have a really nice clear view of the mountain. And so my goal here was to get back to Buck Creek Pass and try to get those shots. So we planned the hike to return to the place. I have some familiarity with this hike, so it was fairly easy for us to put together. We met up in the morning. We have a drive out on Highway 2. You go past Stevens Pass, and you're kind of almost out to Leavenworth before you turn into the woods, head up the forest roads for about 45 minutes to the trailhead. So, we get to the trailhead around 10, 11, something like that in the morning, and then you've got a 10-mile hike. And on paper, the hike really doesn't seem that brutal. It's 10 miles, about 3,000 feet of elevation, so overall that's like a fairly gentle climb. Although, granted, there are a couple spots that are switchbacks where you gain elevation a lot more quickly. But even still, compared to other places that you could hike, this is fairly moderate. You're certainly not, summiting a crazy peak or anything like that. So it's a very attainable hike. But the trail hasn't been super well maintained. I was there 2 years prior, and I think it was in worse condition this time when we got back than it was that prior time. And there's a few things that kind of contribute to that. I know it's not as heavily traveled. We didn't see another single person this whole hike while we were out there. So that probably contributes to it a little bit. It may not be very high on the list from a maintenance standpoint for the Forestry Service or Department of Natural Resources or Washington Trails Association, whoever does those. And granted, I know those organizations are all overworked and understaffed, as these kind of public resources typically are. So, understandable perhaps that the trail's in the state that it's in. But one of the things that makes it a little bit more difficult is that the first half of the trail, you're hiking through this burn scar from a wildfire that happened about 7 years ago. And that means that, that whole section you're exposed. There's not really any shade anywhere. And this just happened to be a really, really hot weekend in July. Temps in the 90s, which is pretty brutal for us in the Northwest. And so Drew and I were hiking through these kind of switchback sections in this exposed terrain in the hottest part of the day after hitting the trailhead, kind of around 11. So we went through, I personally drank like 3 liters of water before we got up to the healthy part of the forest again, that's about 6 miles in. And I remember like looking at my hat and I could see like the salt stains on it where I had been like losing electrolytes like crazy from just sweating our asses off. So that was certainly a factor that contributed to the difficulty of the hike, where it was just like under other conditions this wouldn't really be that bad, but with the heat we had to be careful not to have heat stroke or anything like that, and really take our time. And on top of that, the bridge over the Chihuahua River is still washed out. So it washed out in 2021 following a pretty significant rainstorm that we had. And they haven't replaced it still. So the way that you cross this river is with a log that's been placed kind of next to where the bridge is. And the drop from that log to the water level is probably about 4 feet. And then the water itself is a couple feet deep. So, not an insignificant fall, especially when you're carrying a backpack that's already kind of heavy with backpacking gear, but then you cram photo gear into it to get it up to like 50 pounds worth of weight, right? So I did think like maybe I could try walking across the river area a little bit down river from the crossing there. So I tried taking off my boots and kind of rolling my pants up to see if that would work, but the water was really, really cold. Within about 30 seconds, my feet were already starting to go numb, and it was flowing really fast, and I think in the middle it was probably about waist deep, so there was really no way that was going to work out. So I abandoned that idea, went back, crossed the log, but that's a kind of another difficulty factor on this, is like there's a pretty sketchy log crossing a couple miles in that you have to kind of deal with. And then because the trees are burnt out in this area, there, again, no shade, and so that lack of shade allows the undergrowth to really just explode and go crazy. And that meant that we were bushwhacking sections of this trail with like plants at like shoulder or head height. And at times it was thick enough that we couldn't even see the trail at our feet. And I know there were lots of like animal burrow holes that were big enough that you could kind of step in and twist your ankle. And fortunately we didn't get hurt. We were going pretty carefully through there, but kind of constantly having to like get through sections of brush that felt like you were going through a jungle is another factor that just kind of lends to the overall sort of strain of the hike, right? On top of that, the bugs were relentless this time of year for some reason. I don't know. I didn't see any people, but I probably saw about 1 million mosquitoes. And all of those things were combined with the fact that, again, dead trees, they're still standing after the fire, but these are all deadfalls, so they fall more often than like regular healthy trees in a non-burnt forest. And we had dozens of places where a tree had fallen across the trail, and then you have to either go over or under it or try to go around if there's a way to get around it. And again, those with a heavy pack, when you're crawling underneath or over a log, that can really kind of sap you for your energy. So all that to say, we got to a campsite about 6 miles in, and we were pretty cooked for the day. So Drew and I sat and talked about our options. The itinerary was a 2-night itinerary. So what we were trying to decide was whether or not we wanted to make a push for the pass on the next day. Now that last 4 miles of hiking, you're past the burnt forest, so I knew it would probably be a little bit better. It's shorter distance, and it probably about 1,200 feet of elevation. So honestly, not that bad. But the bugs and the heat, the forecast looked like it was going to be hotter the next couple of days, as well as the knowledge that even if we make it up the pass on the second day, on the third day we would have had a 10-mile hike out. And that meant that, even if we left very early in the morning at sunrise from the pass, we were going to have to navigate the upper part of the valley first, and then we would again be crossing this burn scar area totally exposed in the hottest part of the day on a hotter day than even the day we came in. So all of those factors added to our decision to not go up the pass on the second day. Plus the fact that on the way in, we saw some really nice looking campsites along the forest road that were just all along the river down there. And given the heat and everything, we were thinking like the shade down there was sounding really nice, and just having the ability to kind of sit along the river and enjoy it. So ultimately, we decided to do that. So we got up early on the second day, packed everything up, and hiked out before it was too hot, got down to the river, set up our tents, and found a nice spot. And then we drove 30 minutes into to the highway to hit the gas station and grab some snacks and stuff, and had a really nice second day camping. But I still was thinking about this idea that I really want to get this photo of Glacier Peak, right? So obviously we didn't get up there and didn't get any pictures like that. We did do a little bit of photography of Buck Peak, which is a pretty cool looking mountain, but you know, all things considered, it was really pretty. We were hanging out down there and looking at it, but the photos weren't anything to write home about, you know, in terms of just like a mountain peak with some light on it and a blue sky. So, you know, they're nice, but nothing I was really stoked about. I think the coolest photo actually that we got from that spot was Drew was taking these photos of these wildflowers up close with his camera. And once we got back, he was looking at his pictures on his computer, and check it out. There was this like super cute little spider hidden on the flower that we couldn't even see at the time. So it was kind of a little Easter egg when we were looking at the photo after the fact, where you could blow it up on your screen. There was this awesome little white spider that was totally camouflaged on the flower. So I think that was actually a really cool photo. I think he probably had a certainly much better photo than I got up there. And then down by the river, we caught the sunset and took some nice photos there where we had a little bit of like sunlight streaming in at a low angle that I thought looked really nice. But ultimately, like, you know, wasn't the photo trip that I was kind of hoping for. So as we got more into the fall, I was doing a little research, and I was trying to find out if there was maybe somewhere else I could go where I would get a view of Glacier Peak. And it turned up this location called North Mountain Fire Lookout that is a little bit outside of Darrington. And so I got the boys together, and we headed out there, out toward Darrington. So we drove out through toward the North Cascades and up the trailhead to the gate that you have to park at, and then we had about a 1.5 mile walk up to the fire lookout. And granted, you could technically see Glacier Peak up there, but it wasn't really the view that I had in my head, right, of this mountain kind of standing on its own. There was this really tall ridge in the way, and you could just barely see the peak of it poking above it. And I put my drone up to get another 400 feet of elevation and see if that might help me get a little better view of it, but it really only helped a little bit. It wasn't really the photo that I was hoping for. But we hung out up there for sunset, and we were able to have some very nice views of Mount Baker. And also that sunset came into the valley down where Darrington is, off to the west, and made for some really pretty photos of all the layers and the haze in the valley. And so ultimately the footage was really nice, but I'm still kind of chasing that picture of Glacier Peak. And so I think this may become a little bit of a saga where this is one photo that I'm going to be chasing really hard, and when I finally get it, it's going to feel really great. But for now, why don't you check out the footage that we got from North Mountain Lookout, and I'll catch you on the next one.